If you're high relator, you're not a fair weather friend. You don't know people lightly, you know people. And I know I'm probably diving into the intermix a little soon, but with high individualization, working with a relator, my number one and number two, I know people deeply very, very fast. And I don't have surface relationships unless it's just an acquaintance. And you touched base on what I think of as one of the most critical aspects of relator, and that is your zones of trust. Every relator has a circle of people in it that is their zone of core trust. Those people will always be there and you trust them with everything. But I also recognized over time that I have concentric circles of trust that go out, and I have a little bit less trust on it. When you first meet me, you're way out here on the edge, but I have to get to know you a little bit before you come in tighter.
Hello, and welcome back to Coach. Today, we are talking about the strength of relator. I have Stacy and Ray in studio with me. They are our expert coaches. And this strength, all of you know somebody with it, and many of you have it in your top 10. There's a lot to unpack with this one. Stacy, let me come to you first. Can you tell the listeners where you are calling in from today, a little bit about what you do, and then your top 5, please?
Yes, absolutely. I'm calling in today from Duluth, Minnesota, which is northern Minnesota on Lake Superior, the largest freshwater body of water in the world. And my top 5 are maximizer, connectedness, positivity, relator number 4, and strategic. And I, like many coaches on this podcast, I do individual coaching. I have a new body of work called Fearlessly Aligned. And I also bring Clifton Strengths to organizations. And my favorite way to do that is for longer engagements, to really bring a strengths-based way of being to workplaces.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. How about you, Ray?
I'm just glad to share the podcast with you. That's fantastic. I'm Ray. I'm coming in from just outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in a little town called Justin, Texas. And it's probably much warmer here than it is there. And I'm an executive coach. As you said, I'm in that individual coaching space, but I also do a lot of work with teams and organizations. I started a business called The Leadership Imperative, so I'm very passionate about leadership. But I ground all of my coaching in strengths. Once I discovered it, that was it. And for me, my strengths, my top 5 anyway, are individualization, relator number 2, maximizer, which we share, mine at number 3, communication at number 4, and we're number 5 Twinkies, both with strategic. So, excellent. That's why I'm glad to be here with you.
This is great. So that you share some strengths is going to give us something to unpack there to see how those combinations work well together. Feel free for the two of you to unpack it 6 or 10 if you want, or even bring bottom 5s as much as you prefer as our experts. I would like you both to start us off with your description of relator. You can give us the big picture relator, the personal relator, just in general, your expert definition and understanding of the strength of relator. I'll come to you first, Stacy.
Okay. Well, gosh, there is a lot to say here. And the first thing I'll say is that when I learned that I had relator and I learned more about it, I honestly was really relieved. I can be really socially awkward when I'm meeting people for the first time and when I don't know them. But if you decide to tell me your whole life story within 5 minutes of our meeting, I will just sit with you and be with you for hours on end. And so actually it was a way that I realized I don't have social anxiety. I'm just a relator. I don't have woo. Woo is really low for me. And so it was one of those things that really normalized a lot of life experience I had. And as Ray said, it's such a hack into not only having those words and understanding how we're showing up and how we're wired, but just a way of navigating forward that is so positive. So I was really relieved. My relator likes to have really deep, trusting relationships with a few people. So not hundreds of people. I have a network of folks that I really am very close with. And I do appear in the wild as an extrovert, but I'm actually really an introvert, more introverted, kind of on the line there of introvert and extroversion. And so you might find me sitting in a corner at a party, for example, with someone who has Relator. So it's a great place to start anyway. Ray, how about you? I'd love to hear how you feel about your Relator.
My Relator, and I think about it in Relator in general, when you have it as high as I do, it's a core part of who I am, and it's been there my whole life. I didn't really know how to define that until I was introduced to strengths, and this crystalline, everything became aware. But I've always used it. I've always had it. I'll call it, thankfully, I have woo at number 8. So I have that balance point of being able to work the room, be friendly with everybody. But my real natural drive is to get to know people deeply, right? I always put it as, if you're high Relator, you're not a fair weather friend. You don't know people lightly, you know people. And I know I'm probably diving into the intermix a little soon, but with high individualization, working with a Relator, my number 1 and number 2, I know people deeply very, very fast. And I don't have surface relationships unless it's just an acquaintance. And you touched base on what I think of as one of the most critical aspects of Relator, and that is your zones of trust. And you mentioned it. Every Relator has a circle of people in it that is their zone of core trust. Those people will always be there, and you trust them with everything. But I also recognized over time that I have concentric circles of trust that go out, and I have a little bit less trust on it. When you first meet me, you're way out here on the edge, but I have to get to know you a little bit before you come in tighter. And I've noticed that throughout my whole life. I just never really had a way of going, I'm a Relator. This is why. I can clearly see how this affects and how it affects and what it does. And like every strength, and we're strengths coaches here. So anybody listening, every strength has a basement. Every strength has blind spots. Relator's got them too. I think we'll talk about them, but trust me, it's got them.
As you both think about Relator and you think about the real essence of value it brings. So think of it from an individual's use case, a team, entire org. I've worked with so many teams where Relator was the number 1 strength. And so you had just this dominance of that strength, including inside my own company. And it was very easy to pick out where Relator can go south. It's not hard to see because it's just, I think, part of being humans. What you were describing, Ray, about concentric circles of trust, even getting into what happens when trust is broken for a Relator, where it can be really challenging. But we challenged ourselves at one point to have an entire team gathering where we only spoke of the virtues. Like, what is it that this brings that's powerful? Why does it give us an advantage? Why does it make it? So I want to hear from you two on just show out a little bit, brag on this strength. Tell us why this is like every team's dream. Why do we all want the Relator folks around us? What's the benefits? What's the power here?
And there's the thing, Relator, I told you I'm passionate about leadership. And when I coach leaders and I train leaders, one of the things I always point out to them is there are core fundamentals to being a good leader. And one of those core fundamentals that is often overlooked is you have to genuinely be interested in your people's success. But it's their success at what their goals are. And that's what throws people. And I always say, people who are high in Relator, when you are a leader, that's a superpower. You will get to know your people so deeply that you know what drives them, you know what makes them tick, what can make them absolutely love what they do and where they're going to go. And you will get the greatest level of engagement from them because you know them so well. And when a team shares Relator deeply, on the rock star side of Relator is you have intense levels of trust. because the people that you work with know you. So they're not, with strengths, we so often have to think about the fact that everyone perceives your actions through their lens of their own strengths. So there's often a misunderstanding of how you do things. So when you're in your relator zone and you're spending time with those people who are in your tightest zone of trust, other people interpret that as cliquish or they've got favorites. You've got to recognize that. But if they know you and they know you're that tight relator, they don't look at you and go, he's got favorites. They go, he's naturally wired to have his tight group. He's in his comfort zone and the zone where he has the greatest trust. It changes the whole dynamic. So having that knowledge among your team, and if you've got a team, and Brandon, I over the top, if you've got a high relator team, that's a team of people who care about each other, who drive for each other, and who have intense amounts of trust. They all get together and they pull together. It is a superpower. Stacy, what do you think?
Well, I love what you've said already and so valuable. And one of the things I think that gets missed with Relator is you do find it, and Brandon, you kind of mentioned this, you find it on high executing teams. And because one of the things that gets missed is that second part of the phrase, even on that short description, which is you find deep satisfaction working with others towards a goal or working with friends towards a goal. And so it tends to be the glue, as I heard you describing, Ray, that pulls a team together, but there also really has to be that opportunity for those relationships to build. And sometimes in my work with teams, what I've found is when you have high executing teams, sometimes they aren't as open to creating those relationships. And we know from the 4 needs of followers, the whole piece about trust, and we've already opened with that and how important that is. But one piece to what you said too, Ray, I do wish that Gallup would change the language that on the blind spot that says cliquish cronyism, because first of all, nobody knows what that means anymore. And especially college students. And they're like, when I worked at the university, they were like, wait, what's a crony? What's a, that. So, and they also thought that they were realtors.
I've had rooms of executives ask me what cronyism is. That's not just college kids. That's like, we might be able to do better with this one. Let's get some terms that help bring appreciation here.
Absolutely. And also probably executives that said, I'm a realtor. I'm like, whoops. Okay. But at any rate, if there's not room in the team for making those relationships, or you have those lone people who have the relator theme and they don't have the opportunity to connect, if that's minimized, then there's trouble on teams usually. And of course, we all know that a lot of the work we're doing is coming into organizations and helping everybody love one another, really, and love how we are wired differently. So I think that's one of the pieces for me as I think about the work that I do. I have my best friends at work. They are not sitting with me in the room where I'm working, but I'm in contact with them every day, sometimes all day, and we're bouncing ideas off of each other. And so I'm more motivated because I've got these best friends at work that I can, click into a personal conversation or do some idea sharing. How about you, Ray?
It looks like it's funny you say that because, and Gallup has it as one of their top questions, right? Do you have a best friend at work? And there's been so much controversy over that in recent times. I've seen so many people comment against it. No, shouldn't be. And I'm like, every time I've ever worked in an organization, I've had my best friend, right? I've had those people. And I was over here nodding as you're talking through it because I describe this to leaders so often. And I'm like, you will have that person or those few people that you will always think to go to first for bouncing ideas, for asking their feedback, and it's because they're in a tight circle of trust. You're that high relator, they're in there. But as a leader, and it's a caution I always say, as a leader, you have to spread the love. You've got to make sure you're not just a leader for these people. You're the leader. You've got to be that person who understands and manages their relator to the best possible outcomes. So you can increase that all the way around. In corporate, like I said, if you go look at any great leader in those teams, you probably got somebody with decently high relator, because they're going to know their people so well. And that changes the dynamic. I cannot say, and you even mentioned it, and the way I've seen it is on high stress sales teams, right? Is that when they're competing and they're put into a situation. I'll even use a quick example. And I hope us not to get in trouble for using the names of businesses, but they're pretty common. BMW and Mini. BMW is commission-based sales. Mini has no commissions. Their sales force is very different in their interactions with people. And I've seen both of them, but it changes the dynamic when you remove that competition with each other for I've got to get the sale because that's where my money comes from. When that changes, the whole interaction changes. Don't want to go down a rabbit hole there, but have high relator changes your whole situation. You and I don't, so you've got connectedness really high, right? It's my, I think 14. So, and I am so much a connectedness person, but I want to know, how does connectedness and relator for you work together? How do those sync?
What if the people you coach could navigate their total health and performance with the same ease as using Google Maps? Our friends at Wellbeing at Work help organizations turn fragmented programs and frustrated employees into thriving, high-performing teams. Wellbeing at Work acts as a GPS to enable total health and peak performance, pinpointing where your people are now, where they want to go, and the best path to get there. With Wellbeing at Work, coaches become credentialed navigators with personalized insights, proven tools, and human-centered support. If you're a coach committed to performance and care, Wellbeing at Work is your path forward. Navigating at scale from burnout to breakthrough is now possible. Visit podcast.34strong.com to find a better way forward to empower a healthier, more energized workforce. Again, that's podcast.34strong.com, Wellbeing at Work.
Well, you've uncovered my really sneaky party trick, and that is that when I sometimes, so large parties, gatherings for me, I tend to, like I said, find that friend, sit in the corner, learn about their whole life, ask questions. But with my connectedness, what I also can be seen doing is, because I know the depth of information from people, I don't share that. I hold that very sacredly, but I often will connect others based on what it is that they are good at, what they love. And sometimes I'll put those two people together and then I'll actually lead the conversation. Just depends on sort of my own energy level. But, for me, that connectedness piece is such a driver of a big picture way of seeing things too. And so, but I do tend to plug people. It's also a little bit of my arranger coming out, plug people into relationships that I think can be really successful. And then there's nothing that lights me up more than to see how that relationship comes to fruition and what beautiful things that happen because of that. And you mentioned, Ray, already your individualization in connection with and I have to use the word connection, right? With relator. What else do you notice as far as interactions with your relator?
Honestly, my relator is so foundational, right? Individualization is my number one, and it is absolutely, but it is so tight with relator. I almost think of them as like an amalgamated pair. Sorry to use a term that they won't understand. A glued together set. They always act together. And as a coach, what it does for me, honestly, is I get inside people's heads in their space and put myself in their seat very, very quickly. And it allows me, as you said, we're not shallow on how we know people. When I get to know people, I get to know people. And honestly, there's a trifecta there. I've got, and you have, strategic, So we're overclocking our CPU. And at the same time, I've got individualization working for me to identify and pull out all the nuances when I'm interacting with somebody, to see their everything about them. And that is feeding my relator profile that I'm like, I know who this person is. I feel this person. And, I've seen that Brandon talked about previously on other podcasts where you have the effect of a different strength from the merging of other strengths. And I think we all know that as coaches, but that's one I see where it pulls in sort of my empathy side. I start to actually feel what they're feeling or understand it. But it's not the same as having high empathy. I just intellectually have it locked in. And you mentioned a ranger. A ranger for me is number 6. So I don't know where it sits in yours, but it's very near and dear and close to my heart, obviously. All of my top 10 bounce off and work with my relator. When I led teams, and the reason I'm so passionate in leadership is high arranger with relator and understanding with individualization and maximizer. I'm all about putting the right people in the right place for the right job. Strengths to me was like somebody opened up the holy script and put it in front of me and said, this is the map to how you do the things you love doing. And I just went, yes, absolutely. So I engage my strengths multifaceted all the way across. I tell people, when I thank the people I am blessed to coach, I let them know that I use all 10 of my top 10 strengths when I coach. When I do facilitation, when I coach, this is like heaven and happiness for me, all eating happiness out of a bowl, as I put it. So, and I can't not use relator. Everything I do is people related. That is the zone of, if you put me on, my maximizer will kick in if I'm writing an audit document, and I will hate life doing it. But put me in a team with them, just like it says, and I'm in the happy spot. Relator shines through. Anecdotally, I'm going to toss this in there real quick, if you don't mind. I've coached a lot of people, both in the States and in the UK and in the Caribbean. And this is purely anecdotal. I haven't run a hard regression analysis, but I can tell you that in the Caribbean, very high relator. Not just the presence of it, but it tends to be top 5, right? Very, very high from all the people I coached there. That was the most common and the highest. And I see the cultural aspects of what creates that relator in people.
Wow, I really love that, especially because as a child, I lived in the Caribbean. Little known fact about me, I lived on the island of Antigua.
Oh, Antigua. I went on my honeymoon there.
Ah, that's wonderful. See, there we go. We have to connect. We have to find ways that we'll probably be best friends after this now, Ray.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the Caribbean, to be honest. It was my second home. We lived in the Cayman Islands for a little over 10, 12 years. So, but Antigua that was our honeymoon. It was amazing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. It's really, I often tell people that our Clifton strengths fire just like synapses. And I love how you've also described the fact that you're really in your happy place. We also know that to be true, right? When we get to do the things that we love. And I know, Brandon, you were going to break in a moment ago with a question. I want to provide that space for you.
Oh, nope. Ray ran it off well. That was good. So continue. I'm very interested to hear how the two of you start to, as you work through and continue to work through your strengths. I become so interested in how this strength colors all of them. It colors everyone. We could say all strengths kind of have a way that they weave together. I have just found in every coaching session I've ever had, and that's a lot, this one is the one that if it's anywhere in vicinity of top 10 to 12, it colors everyone. Everyone responds to relator. It has that kind of dominance. And I'm just curious from the two of you, as you continue to unpack this, how it colors your other strengths, because it sits so much, it's so present to how you perceive your people and how you engage with them. And so it starts to filter the others, and curious in the way that works, or how you understand it as you look at your other strengths.
I'll jump in there with that. Like I said, it does color everything about how I interact with people. And when I get to know them, when I talk to them, and then when I'm working with them, when I'm making decisions about, when I was in corporate and I was making decisions about who am I assigning work to, and this was before I even knew strengths, I was subconsciously using my relator and my maximizer to go, I'm not assigning him a job based just on this need. I'm looking at how can I get the best product and his career advancement and do what's best for the team. My maximizer and my relator were firing together over time, making me go, best, and a ranger, best one. Okay, I need to put him. And I even had kickback. People would scream and go, why did you give him that project? I'm the best person for that. And I had to explain, I said, you are the best person for that. You're absolutely right. But I gave it to him because you need somebody that can backstop you, that if you need help, they're there. And I can't promote you if you're stuck as the only person that can do it. I'm trying to give you an opportunity to be able to grow, because I knew what he wanted, because I knew him so well. And I was able to, and my strategic was going like crazy of all the patterns I could put together to pull the best possible outcome. Yeah. Relator for me is so subconscious. I really actively have to think about, and again, I say individualization and relator, but I really have to think about team. I have to force myself out of person and think team or group. That, for me, it's one of those, and when I teach different types of leadership, I often say right up front, I'm a transformational leader at heart. At my core, I'm all about the one-on-one personal understanding, interaction, and transforming of a person into what they can become. That's literally my strengths encapsulated. So I have to step back from myself and say, okay, wait a second. I also have to be the leader who's thinking about, how is the team going to progress? How are we going to succeed in this zone? And then I can jump back into my strengths and go, and I know exactly who to put where, do, how, and why, where we can get them together. It's a fun dance, to be honest. It has been for me, and it's given me the ability to see when there are leaders who are falling down in that zone and help guide them to recognize how they can adjust and shift.
Yeah, well, I really love that. And I'm almost seeing, as you're talking about it, this map that you referred to a little bit ago, that your go-to theme really is this relator, but also really entangled with the individualization. And I would say that's really true for me too, is that, sometimes I think, am I sure I don't have individualization in my top 10? And I can't think of where it is in my lineup right here. It's my envy theme, I think. But I see that when I'm working on projects, when I'm working with teams, my first go-to is always going to be, if I am thinking back to a workshop I just did last week, where the people in the room, I will more likely use a person that I know, of course, as an example, and be able to talk with them because I know certain things about them. That is the go-to that I'm very comfortable with. But I also, Ray, hear you talking about, and we've sort of circled around this a little bit, that blind spot. And we joked about the cliquish cronyism, but that whole piece, that how do we ensure that our relator, and you did speak to this a little bit, Ray, that our team members, the people that we're working with, when they understand how we're wired, they do understand that we are not it's not favoritism, But how do we ensure, and how do leaders ensure, even to stretch that further, that their relator is not causing harm, let's just say? And I would love to hear you speak to that, Ray.
You know how we start our coaching business on a high, only to get absolutely overwhelmed by the business side of things? We're suddenly supposed to be a full-time salesperson, marketing funnel maker, email marketing expert, social media manager, customer service rep, and tech expert all in one. Yeah, overwhelm. Well, Lisa Cummings, our strengths coach friend, created a membership that gives you an insane member vault that will blow your mind. All the tools, systems, and templates to save you time and money. It's the actual assets Lisa used at Lead Through Strengths to build a successful strengths coaching business. All the assets are yours to customize and make your very own. She even gives you 2 years worth of emails you can use to serve your customers. So check it out at podcast.34strong.com, Lead Through Strengths. Again, podcast.34strong.com, Lead Through Strengths from Lisa Cummings.
And honestly, one of the things I often say is when you understand your strengths, you've gained a level of knowledge. And with great knowledge comes great power, and great power comes great responsibility. When you know your strengths, you have to share. You have to communicate to people so that they know your strengths. Because when they have that clarity on who you are, that changes the dynamic of how they perceive you. Instead of perceiving you through their strengths, as I say, they're not looking at you through their own glasses anymore. They start to perceive you through yours. And the second aspect of that great responsibility is that a leader has to recognize the downsides of their strengths, those basements. Sorry, I'm a little bit old school. I'm still in the balcony basement terminology. But the basement, when it's not operating to the best effect. And as a leader, you've got to recognize your duty to the whole team. And I often tell people, don't shy away from the strength. Absolutely not. It's your strength for a reason. Live in that strength, but manage the aspects that other people might misperceive. And you never know, if you step outside your zone of trust and you spend more time with people that aren't yet inside, you might just find that they deserve to be inside. Work with them and you'll find people that you didn't know you needed inside that zone. And you pull them in and your team gets even stronger. So you have to be self-aware. And I'm all about know yourself, right? On my website, very first thing you say, know yourself deeply and your path becomes clear. And if you know yourself, you know what to manage. You know how to recognize when you're outside of your good zone and get back into the zone of awesome. Yeah, obviously I'm passionate about these.
Oof, absolutely. I love it. We just get going and we get into this fugue almost. But one thing I would add to that when we're talking about leaders, for example, is when I coach leaders, executives, sometimes they report to me, I have Relator, they'll have it, even 1, 2, or 3. And I know that I'm in this sort of isolated position. I can't really talk up. I can't really, share. There's certain things I don't want to share that might be going on in my life. I'm not sure how my team will take that. And so I know those are some of the challenges that leaders with Relator have. And I will also say, and this sounds sort of, I don't know, it sounds really rudimentary perhaps, but there are times when, especially when I'm working myself with teams, that I can get lost in a conversation with someone because we have a lot in common. They're telling me something that maybe they felt inclined to share, which often happens, right? I've never told anyone this. And I sometimes, as I'm thinking about the time of this podcast, I'm thinking, how much time have I actually spent with this person? And really, and that has to be a little bit of a checkpoint for me, because I don't want that team that I'm working with, whether I'm in a leadership capacity or I'm there as a facilitator, to feel like I really only want to talk to that one person. And so I really have to be mindful myself to spread my love, so to speak, to all people and to get to know folks, a little bit better. I have to pretend I have woo, I guess, a little bit. Take my relator a little bit, spread it out.
I was going to say, I'm blessed with the fact that I have woo high enough that's just naturally what I do. They recognize when I spend a greater amount of time with someone that it's just probably because I'm diving deep on something, because I spend time with everyone. I want to know, right? When I come into a team, I want to know everybody. I actively work to go and meet and know them. And yeah, I don't, and it's one of those interesting things for me because I don't have a thing. If you asked me, who do you know just a little bit, it would be somebody that I met in passing on a plane, right? And that's only if we only talked for 5 minutes. I've sat on a plane, it's a 3-hour ride, and I came away knowing a lot about that person, right? It just quick deep dive. And I always caution people, understand your basements because it's part of your responsibility. But let me say it again, and I will never say otherwise. Dive in, lean in, dance in your strengths. If it's in your primary, if it's in that top 10, that's where you should be spending as much of your life as you can. You will impact the world so much better, and your life will be so much better. So even when they're scared of, oh, I'm a leader and don't be scared of it. Be aware of it. Manage it. But don't let it keep you from being amazing in your relator. Don't let it keep you from dancing in your strengths and showing up as the absolute rock star you can be in the way you are.
I have found that relator, when it is or has been matured, it has been given room to breathe, to develop, and to do what Ray was just saying, leaning in to the strength of the strength. It almost has a way that it auto-corrects itself back to its best place, because I have found that relators can build value and principles around the strongest part of the strength. So to operate on the parts that are less than optimal or even adversely affecting a situation, there's an internal mechanism that reverts them back to their best and highest use of this one. And it seems to have the ability to cause this to be what some might call one of the super strengths, one of the strengths that brings out the best in all the other strengths. And that's when I was mentioning earlier how it colors them all. When it has developed, wow, it just seems to bring a thriving element to the other strengths. And now I have to be also authentic. It can adversely do the same thing, not matured. It can actually affect very negatively all of your strengths when you don't have this one, when you hold rivalry, jealousy, vengeful, whatever that place this strength can get to that's unhealthy. Everything works in service of the unhealthy part of that strength. And when it is matured and able to operate at its best, everything works to that side. And it takes more. It is work, and yet it's also the impact of some of our most impactful leaders, all sectors. Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, I just want to put a name to what you're saying there, Brandon, at least for me, and this may be different for Ray or for others with Relator, but if I had to give a different word for Relator, I would say love. And I would say unconditional positive regard, which has always been a working place for me. I have a master's in counseling and I wrote a paper on that, of course. But this idea that people are doing the best they can where they are in the moment, that piece that you mentioned about self-correcting. Well, okay, now my positivity is shining through. I'm always believing that people are operating out of their best selves. And so for me, Relator is really about unconditional love and unconditional positive regard. Yeah, and I did have a curious question too for you, Ray. So for me, I just will say that when I think about my relationships that I have, those very intimate ones, and I can name probably about 10 people that are in, for me, more of a friend or my best friends at work kind of a thing. What I've noticed about my Relator pattern is that each relationship has some very specific qualities to it that are very different than others. And I'm not often looking for other people to bring into that because I'm very aware and honoring of what each relationship brings. So I'm wondering if that hits home for you, or what your individual relationships.
You nailed it. And I'm going to tie that into what Brandon just talked about, because I think they're linked. And that is, Brandon, you said it colors all of your other ones, and you're not wrong. And I think how it colors them is when you know somebody and you start to know them deeply, it adjusts which strengths you dance in with that person. How you show up for each person becomes more tied to that person. When you know, so if you've got two completely different team members, you will show up how they need you to show up. And that's not always going to be in the same strengths. You're going to co-opt different of your strengths and your zones of talent and that would be informed by the relator, by that, how well you gel and understand that person. And for me, Stacy, absolutely, right? You've got some friends and you know, absolutely, these two people never should meet, right? That's oil and water right there. You get along famously with both. They are not the ones that need to be in close orbit to each other. And you'll know, and it's sort of that, well, why do you have this group that you spend time with and this group, but you don't spend time with those groups together? It's because those groups are not meant to be together. And that high relator gives you a depth of understanding of them. And I'll say it even ties in with individualization and intellection. It tells me you don't mix those. Most people do this subconsciously, right? And I think that's one of the things. Relator is so subtle there that it does allow for it to create that subconscious effect across all of them, and how we show up will shift and change. And Brandon, I know I'm all about the positive, but I'm also about responsibility. The second thing that I think high relators have a problem with, don't get upset that everybody else doesn't know you as well as you know them. It's natural for me to know people and get inside their heads and really know them and what drives them. And not as many people can say that about me, right? If you're in my circle, you almost certainly know it about me. Outside that, I have to say, I'm a relator. Not everybody is. We're good.
Thank you, Ray and Stacy. And on that note, we're going to say thank you to our listeners for tuning in this week. And if the topic of relator really sparked something of interest, either because you are a top 10 relator or know some, and I guarantee you know many, this is an episode to share forward, one that you will not only find value for yourself, but for people you lead, people you coach, clients and colleagues alike. And so, Ray, I'm going to come to you first. Where can people find you? And, give some direction to them as far as the work you're doing and how they might get a hold of you.
Absolutely. Easiest way would be to go to, I say easiest way, and then I'm going to say the name and everybody's going to be like, what? You can go through my website. It's the leadershipimperative.coach, not .com. So 2 words, one together, leadershipimperative.coach. There's a reach out form on there. You can see who I am. You could also find me obviously on LinkedIn as Ray Swarts, SHRM CP, since I'm in the people space. And yes, I am, as I said, very passionate. Leadership, communication, engagement, strengths, these are my zones. If you or your team are having difficulties, I would love to talk to you. I am very well versed at getting people and teams into working well. It's kind of a passion.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. Stacy.
Thank you. Well, I am very active on LinkedIn, Stacy Crawford, and then also my business, Clearwater Coaching with a K. That's Clearwater Coaching and Wellness. I do a fair amount of wellness work as in organizational spaces, public speaking, and so forth. I also have team insight cards, which are great for, and I know, Brandon, you have a set. They are great for coaches. I'm happy to share a link for that too. I have a little deck right here. But I love, as I said, bringing strengths-based ways, communication, and Clifton Strengths to organizations. I work individually with leaders and individual contributors, and so many fun projects. But I'm so delighted to be here, and thank you, Ray and Brandon, for the conversation.
All right. Well, you too. That was great. Thank you so much. And listeners and visitors, we will look forward to seeing you next time on Coach to Coach.
That's a wrap on this episode of Coach to Coach. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're a strengths coach looking to dive deeper, join the Coach Strong community. It's where coaches like you come together to share insights, support one another, and discover partnership opportunities. Be part of the conversations that are elevating our industry. Email community@34strong.com to join today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on Coach to Coach. Stay strong.